Welcome to Daily Armor. I was just wondering if you ever have days, maybe several days, like I do, where your thoughts are just kind of everywhere, where you can't seem to focus on what you are really supposed to be working on. It's like you've got 10 different things going on in your mind. Maybe it keeps you up at night. I know I woke up this morning right before 2 a.m. and couldn't go back to sleep till about 4 a.m. So I'm very tired today. But um, just my mind on overload, just thinking of all the things that I need to be doing and need to be working on, and then asking God, Lord, what do you want me to be focused on? What is the main priority? I have used a phrase. You probably use it as well, and I'll say, well, we just got to roll with it. You just kind of have to run with it. We're going to have to work with what we've got. I've used this phrase probably more often than I realize, or at least I know that I use the mindset of that rolling with it. I was actually curious to see what I could find, just putting in roll with it and asking for a definition. And I kind of laughed because it said that to be flexible, that it was a boxing term, and that it was to help, if you roll with the punches, it was to help lessen the impact. And I thought, man, that's really helpful. That helps you physically. You put it into practice. My stepdad, my Papa Jack, my Papa Bear, he boxed, and it was, several in the family boxed, and so we boxed all the time. I mean, every time that we got in a wrestling match or in an altercation, Daddy was like, Michael said he could take you in 3 rounds. I'm like, no, he can't. And it was just something. It was kind of it was boxing terms all the time. He had a punching bag, and I loved to watch him work that bag. I loved it. He had like a little rhythm going, and I loved to watch him do that. So that boxing terminology made me think of him, made me miss him. I miss him all the time, but to really, that was a happy memory that I have of getting to play around with boxing, and Daddy just threw me in there with the boys, and I had to fend for myself. What did I have to do? I had to roll with it. I had to roll with it, and do what I could do to keep up with the boys. And so it was when you were rolling with it, it's to help you. You got to stay flexible. You got to be able to move. You can't be rigid. If you're going to be rigid, if you're going to stand there like a stone wall and you get an impact, it's going to hurt. Way worse than it would have to. But if you can kind of relax and roll with it, you're going to lessen that impact. Our verse today, I've got two, really one verse that was actually shared with me a couple of days ago, and I've just been kind of knew that when I read it that I wanted to look more into it, and it actually led me to another passage, actually another whole chapter, and it ended up being like one of my favorite chapters. I wouldn't say it was the exactly top, but I would say it was in the top 5. Especially in the book of Psalms. But we're going to start with Proverbs 16:3. Proverbs 16:3. And going with this thought of when your thoughts are kind of everywhere, when you are thinking about this situation and that situation, and especially as women, we're very good multitaskers. But at the same time, because we're good multitaskers, that can get us in a lot of trouble. Not like, that we're doing something so bad, but then that could cause us a lot of stressors. Maybe that's a better way to word it, is that can cause us a lot of extra stress because we are able to take on several things at one time. At the same time, when it gets stressful, then we have trouble getting that focus pointed back into where we need to have it. And where we need to have it is prioritizing, this is what God has told me to do. And that's where this verse really, really helped me. I think because the previous devotion, and when I ended it, I uploaded it, but it was one of those that I was like, that made no sense whatsoever. And I probably mentioned that. I'm thinking I mentioned that in the middle of the devotion, that I hope this is making sense to y'all, because I knew what I was trying to say, and sometimes I struggle with capturing those correct words, those words that'll maybe, allow you to see what I'm trying to, what's going on in my mind, the thoughts that I'm trying to roll with. So let's look at Proverbs 16:3, and then we're going to be in Psalms 37. That's where we'll land, is in Psalms 37. That's going to be the main focus, but this Proverbs 16:3 is just going to be a little diving board here, get us started. It says, commit thy works unto the Lord, and thy thoughts shall be established. When I read that thy thoughts shall be established, I knew that was a verse that was going to comfort me and was going to help me get my focus back. I knew so much about what I wanted to say, and it seemed to be such a struggle to get the video actually done on the previous two devotions. That was a two-parter. And I struggled so much finding that time. I would get interruptions. Different things would happen. That's kind of what the whole reason that we need to roll with things. Things don't go as planned. And I'm a planner. I'm a list maker. I have lots of lists. I have lots of them. I have on my phone, I have an app, and I have lots of lists. I have them categorized for different things. It helps me keep things straight. I have stuff on index cards. I write in my notebook all the time. It really, really helps me that when I'm trying to focus on one thing, and then I've got these other things on my mind, what I do is I can write those others down, and I can say, you know what? I've got those, or I'm not going to forget those because I've got them wrote down. But right now, I've got to give my time to this. And so what's happened is I took such a long time, and I had to roll with the circumstances of every single day being something different, that I was saying, Lord, it's up to you, when I get to do this. And it was always like there was a little something else that I needed to wait. I needed to wait on him. And so I really appreciate that I didn't stress about it, because I was rolling with it. When you're rolling with it, you are realizing that you're not in control of the circumstances, and you're gonna be flexible. You're gonna be pliable in the potter's hands. If you're rigid and you're all dried and you're all stern, and there's no room for change, there's no room for things to be different, you're going to miss out on so many blessings. Man, are you going to miss out. Sometimes, because nothing ever goes as planned, then new things come into play that you never planned for, and it ends up being pretty wonderful. Or maybe it doesn't go quite like you planned, but you were like, that was very unexpected, and you were like, that was pretty exciting. And what you do is you're realizing that, hey, I don't have any control. No matter how much I plan for things, no matter how much that I set aside this time, or set aside that money, or set aside this whatever, that I'm committing over here to this, and I've got this to do and that to do. No matter what those things are, you realize that your steps are ordered of the Lord. and he's the one that's in control. And that's why that I springboarded on over to Proverbs or to Psalms 37. I like verse number 5 in Psalms 37, but I really, God has used a lot of different, at different times in my life, he's used Psalms 37. I was fretting about some circumstances. I was upset about some things. And we do that from time to time. And the Lord, I even wrote this on my prayer sheet. It was one of those things, I was like, Lord, I need some verses. And he's like, I've been giving you some for 22 years. You've got plenty of verses to go back to use and to reuse. And I had wrote down Psalms 37, and I had wrote down a date. I believe it was like in September 16th of, I don't even remember what year, just a few years ago or last year or whenever it was. It's not been all that long ago. It wasn't this year, must have been last year or the year before. And I was fretting about some things. I was upset about some things. And I was praying to the Lord and writing them down. And I'm like, Lord, I am upset about these things. I am really, really torn about these things. And through studying and reading, and this passage led me to flip over here and this one over here. And I landed on Psalms 37. And it says, fret not. I was like, okay, Lord, you know it. You knew exactly what I needed. You knew exactly what I needed. And before we move on to Psalms 37, I want to just mention a few more things in this Proverbs 16:3. When we are committing our works unto the Lord, when we are doing those things that He has instructed us to do, we have made a commitment. But our commitment is not that rigid and stern and nothing can change. And God's not that way. He doesn't change. But man, all the circumstances that He puts us in sure does change. I can go to church with a plan. This is what we're going to do here. This is what we're going to do here. We're going to do this over here. We're going to do this. I have some plans for tonight. I'm doing this devotion on Wednesday. I actually have a special youth Wednesday night planned, and I know it's not going to go exactly as planned. First of all, I don't ever know who's going to show up. I don't ever know what I'm going to have to work with. I don't ever know if something's going to be wrong. This past Sunday morning, we had no internet. We had no cameras, and we just had to roll with it. We had to use what resources we had. We were still able to do audio, but we had no video. And it's just circumstances like that all the time. You don't know if if somebody's going to be sick that you had previously, thought, well, I'm going to count on this person for this. If I've got something in Sunday school and in the lesson, it's like, you need, this many kids and this is a good project for this. And I'm like, well, I don't know how many kids I'm going to have. I never know. I never know how many I'm going to have to work with. And some projects, it's kind of based on using several kids at one time. And I'm like, well, I better have a plan B because I just don't know. I never know what to expect. But what I do, and it's not that way so that you can get upset about it. But when you're rolling with it, you're relaxing. I mean, when you're rolling with the punches, that boxer, when they're training, they have to be flexible. They have to move around. They have to be, you can't always anticipate the opponent when they're gonna throw a punch, but you're trying to anticipate and you're being flexible. You're moving around, you're keeping everything soft, you're keeping all your movement soft, because you're trying to roll with it, you're trying to be flexible. And what you're doing is you're allowing yourself to expect that you're expecting the unexpected. And it's to soften the blow of that. Now, if I went to church and I was counting on there has to be 5 kids in my class or 10 kids in my class, or I can't do this activity, and if I can't do this activity, I'm done teaching Sunday school. How silly would that be? That would be so silly. If the preacher went on Sunday morning and he was like, well, we don't have a piano player today, we don't have any ushers today. He had to go to church when we didn't have any people. And it didn't stop him. He had to be flexible. He had to roll with it. We had several, months of going to church, and he was preaching to just me in the sanctuary but he was looking across that sanctuary as if it was full of people. He was looking across and he was thinking about all those people that were sitting there a few months before, and it was a blessing. Even though we're so glad everybody's back, or at least most everybody's back, we're excited about that, and it's so much better to have the people in the sanctuary. But it was such a treasure as well to roll with it, to be flexible, it gives you kind of an appreciation for those that weren't there. You appreciate them so much more, maybe that we were taking things for granted, and of all the things, during that time frame that went wrong, some things you just appreciated more because we went through that, and continue to have to go through things, but we just roll with it. So we're committing thy works unto the Lord. That's going to let us roll with it. We're going to run with it. We're going to wallow in it. You're going to trust him in it and through it. And wallowing in it, I liked the definition of wallowing in it. It was coming two different ways, and it's to roll about or lie relaxed in mud or water, like an animal will wallow in the mud. They'll wallow around in the mud or something, and they're relaxing, and they're doing that for their protection. But also, when you're wallowing in something, it's like a nostalgic moment that you have, and you're just in awe, and you're just delighting and enjoying whatever that you're experiencing. So we can commit thy works unto the Lord, and then thy thoughts shall be established. So when I'm trying to reset my focus, then I'm like, Lord, what am I supposed to be doing? I've got all these different things going on, but what is my main focus? And he'll give me that when I'm flexible and I'm rolling with it. But then when all of that sometimes gets you a little bit, makes things a little bit cloudy, and then you kind of maybe you get a little unfocused for a little bit. Maybe it just kind of gets you a little confused for a little bit. And you're like, Lord, I need to get back focused. I need to get back. I need my thoughts to be gathered up. I'm kind of like a little bit everywhere, and all my lists are right now my lists are overwhelming me. Instead of helping me stay organized, sometimes they can overwhelm us. And so I would go back to what God wants, not what everybody else wants. All that's down the list a little bit, not what I want. Sometimes I'm the problem. Sometimes I'll be so focused on some things that I want. And he's like, if you'll quit worrying about that over there, we'll handle that. I'll take care of that later. But right now I want you to be focused here. And he helps me to focus my thoughts by being flexible in the work that I'm doing for him. And now let's go turn to Psalms 37. Psalms 37 is one of those Psalms that he has used throughout the years to help me when I'm a little bit unfocused, when things are a little bit cloudy, when I feel like I'm a little bit confused. I really don't know what I'm, supposed to be doing. He reminds me that I have some orders. He reminds me that he's the one with the plan. He reminds me that he's given me very clear instructions, and that all this other stuff has just kind of got me all sidetracked, and I've taken my eyes off the main focus, and that's him. So Psalms 37, I'm not going to read the whole psalm. It's a very lengthy psalm. If you would like to read it sometime, take your time. Read it one section at a time. Really take your time. Don't just try to run through it. It's a lot. It says a lot. And especially go with those little key words, and it'll start with fret not, the very first thing. When I read that September, whenever it was, maybe last year, not this year, but last year, September, I think it might have been, when I read that, and I realized when he said fret not, and that's exactly what I was doing. I was fretting. I was upset, and I was fretting around about some stuff, and I was feeling overwhelmed about some situation, and I was upset about some things, and I was heartbroken. I was absolutely heartbroken that day. And he told me to fret not. And I'm telling you, whenever he tells you to stop fretting, it's like it's like that parent when they tell that child, okay, that's enough, dry it up, that's enough. When you know that it's time for them, they were upset, but now it's time to move on. It's time to dry up those tears. It's time to get up and let's get back to, get back to whatever we were doing. It's when he says it, and it's in such authority, but also such comfort. I mean, those words, not only were they part of my discipline, but they were also part of my comfort. They were part of my comfort. And so look at those key words, especially in this Psalms 37. It'll start with, not every verse does this, but a lot of verses will do this, and it'll say, fret not. I like this in verse number 3. It says, trust in the Lord, for delight thyself also in the Lord. 5, commit thy way unto the Lord. Trust also in him, and he shall bring it to pass. So this was where I went after Proverbs 16:3. Is I went actually to Psalms 37, verse number 5. Commit thy way unto the Lord. And the two words commit here mean the same thing. Commit thy way unto the Lord. Trust also in him. So when you get in those situations, we're like, well, Lord, this is not what we planned. Well, it might not be what you planned, but he's always had the plan, and he's always, he always knows what we're going to have to work with. He knows who's going to show up. He knows what resources you're going to have. He knows how much money's in the bank. And it doesn't surprise him. It doesn't shock him. It doesn't change anything for him. It may seem to change some things for us, but it doesn't change anything for him. And that's why he says, trust in the Lord. So you're committing to him, but then you have to trust him through it. So when those punches come, you're able to roll with it. You're rolling with it. You're flexible. You're moving with it. You're adjusting things because of it. You're going to find out that it's going to lessen that impact a little bit. It's not going to hurt as bad. And it also might even find, that it kind of goes better the way that things go rather than the way that we plan for. So sometimes plans are good. Don't get me wrong. I make lots of plans. I'm the planner in the family. My daughter won't hardly go anywhere, out of town unless her mama goes, because I've spoilt her with planning. I said, I'll plan it for you. You and Jacob go somewhere. I'll plan it out for you. I'll tell y'all every day where to go. I'll have you a whole list of options that you can pick from. I'll plan it all. She's like, no, Mama. Why? Because she's afraid you won't be able to figure out how to roll with it when something changes, when something that I've sent her to is actually closed or something. And she won't know she's afraid she won't know how to roll with it. And that's something I think she's better at it than she realizes. She really is better at it than she realizes. She's really a whole lot more like her mama than she realizes. But when we're committing thy way unto the Lord, trust also in him, and he shall bring it to pass. See, the problem is that when God's give us a job, and then we start, okay, this is what I've got to do here and I've got to do here. Then we start making all these plans, or at least I do. I start making all these plans. Then this is the way I think it's supposed to go. And then there's some things that take place, and some things that have some punches get thrown. And I'm like, oh, I got to be flexible here. I got to move. I thought we was going over here, but now I've got to move over that way. I got to, I'm rolling with the punches, and I'm running with this new set of circumstances that I've been given. And to do that, I'm trusting him because it's his plan, not my plan. That's like, I've talked about this before, about that when we pray, and we're not praying to get God lined up with us. We're praying to get us lined up with him, because it's his plan. He's the leader. He's the creator. He's the father. He's the authority. He's the everything. He's the everything. And so whenever I look at this verse number 5, and it says, and he shall bring it to pass. When I am trusting in him, and my job is to be committed and be flexible. When you think about some of the battles that were won in the scriptures, it didn't always go like what they thought. I remember particularly two instances I'm thinking of right off the top of my head, and I'm thinking about Moses. And as long as his arms were lifted up and stuff, then the battle, then they were overtaking the enemy, but then he was getting tired and weary. And so then he had to have, Aaron and Hur come up beside of him and kept his arms up. So he had to roll with it. He had to actually accept some help. But it was all of it's God's plan. I'm thinking also, of course, here lately, been thinking about Gideon ever since, which, I've looked at Gideon many, many times, the life of Gideon. But whenever Brother Mike Suffin was here and did our revival, he used Gideon for the week. And to think that God, we gather all these men up for God to say, okay, you got too many. We're going to get rid of his, a bunch here. We're going to get rid of some bunch there, and leaves Gideon with 300 to work with. He had to roll with it. He had to be flexible. How was he able to do that? Because he was trusting in the Lord. What was he trusting the Lord to do? To bring it to pass. He was absolutely, that is an actual wonderful example of things not going as where you think they're going to go, not exactly how you think that they should run, or you think you're going to have all these people to work with, and it's not going to just be this small little group. But he blessed in the small little group. He blessed, and he brought it to pass. He got the victory. Nobody could take credit for it. Not one single person could take credit for it. They knowed what they had done. They had just been, marching around. They had their pictures and the lights, and it's all this lights. They couldn't see it from their perspective. They couldn't see what the enemy saw. The enemy, when the enemy looked, it looked like they were just thousands. They thought they were just going to be overtaken by just all these men. And it was just a few of them. But from their perspective, they were just rolling with it. We're just, we've got these broken pictures. We got this light casting forth, and we're just doing what God said, and we're rolling with it. We're like, Lord, I'm so glad you know what we're doing. I'm so glad that you've got the plan. I'm so glad that you're going to give the victory. I'm so glad that I don't have this figured out, because this surely wouldn't have been part of my plan. This surely wouldn't have been my strategy. But plans change, and we just have to roll with it. And sometimes that because things are different or changing, that sometimes it can take our thoughts can get a little unfocused and get a little scattered. And so then we just bring it back in and ask God, okay, Lord, tell me again. Now, what did you want me to be doing? And focus on those things, and let Him bring all that other stuff to pass. Let Him worry about all the rest of that stuff. Thank you for joining me. I look forward to seeing you again soon.